Hello! So today I'm going to talk about Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. A friend of mine gave me this book and he said it genuinely surprised him, so I was intrigued. Now I have never heard of Chuck Tingle before, but from a quick Google I found this out. Chuck Tingle is a pseudonymous author, primarily of niche gay erotica. The stories mainly take the form of monster erotica, featuring romantic and sexual encounters with dinosaurs, imaginary creatures, inanimate objects, and even abstract concepts. Not really my go-to genre. However, Camp Damascus is his first mainstream publication. This novel is a horror thriller satire covering the themes of persecution, specifically LGBTQIA+ people, religion/religious cults, acceptance, love, and found family. Now don't let the cover or the blurb of this book fool you because it does not start exactly where I expected it to. I expected this book to be set in a conversion camp, but actually a vast amount of this novel takes place outside of Camp Damascus, and the reason I bring this up is because when I was reading it, I did keep expecting, oh, so when are we going to go to the camp? When are we visiting the camp? When are we visiting the camp? And it would have been nice not to have had that thought in my mind the whole time. So I thought I would let you know, don't go in expecting that, just go with the flow. Told in the first person, we follow Rose. Now, Rose is fast approaching her high school graduation. However, due to her religious community, she has taken many gap years throughout her education, so her age is actually around 20. She's trying to enjoy a normal summer break in the town of Neverton. She has been raised in the faith of an evangelical, highly strict, heavily patriarchal sect called Kingdom of the Pine. Close by to Neverton is Camp Damascus, a conversion camp which has a 100% success rate. But how they achieve this, well, that's where the horror lies. And I don't think it's a big spoiler to let you know that Rose is gay. She also sits somewhere on the autistic spectrum. She is very smart, curious, and inquisitive. It's extremely hard for me to talk about this book without giving away spoilers because it shifts so much. The twists and the turns are constant. So past the 20-page mark, I can't really tell you anything. I can tell you there's some demons, there's some deaths, friendships are formed, and there's even a flamethrower. So what did I like and what didn't I like? What I liked. Mainly, I loved how much this book surprised me. It's not as trashy as I thought it was going to be, nor is it as violent or as gory as I thought it was going to be, and in a good way. This horror novel has actually got tons and tons of heart. I thought the plotting and the pacing were utterly fantastic. The prose is simple and clean, and it kind of reads like a film. Side note, I know there are some readers out there who can't stand books that read like films. They want their books to feel like books, and I get that. So this should be a first warning to you that if you don't like that style, this book isn't for you. And as much as the pacing is non-stop, it does feel like it builds really, really well, giving us a solid connection to Rose. Like, it takes its time, but it shifts constantly and exactly where it needs to. It's just really well balanced. I loved Rose as a character. I loved her determination and also the inner turmoil that she's going through. She is battling against her faith, which is so ingrained in her, but her curiosity and who she is refuses to step down. We also get a couple of side characters, one who I absolutely adored, but I can't really go into too many details for spoilers. I also really love the satire running throughout this book. It's levelled just right. It's there, so we always have this constant sort of sense of humour, but it's not levelled too much that it takes away from the tension or the horror. What didn't I like? Two things. As much as I enjoyed the simple and clean prose throughout, at times it does feel a little YA. And I don't mean that to be an insult. Of course, we all know there is some fantastic YA fiction out there. However, I don't know if this book was intended to be YA or not, but because of the content, I feel like definitely not. So therefore, in moments where it feels like the writing isn't quite mature enough, it just lets the book down a little bit. Just not quite hitting the heights it could have. Now, my second gripe I'm being quite picky with, but there is a character early on who dies, who's given some weight, and yet Rose just seems to totally forget about this character. Just forgets about them, as if all of the weight and gravitas that was put on them just doesn't really matter. And I found that really, really odd in a book that otherwise took a good amount of time and care over every other detail. But that's it for the things I didn't like. For a horror thriller novel, this book totally surprised me. It was not what I thought it was going to be, and I thought it was excellent. I'm going to give it 4 stars out of 5. FYI, I know this channel has a lot of literary fiction fans, some who will click on any video I upload, and I really do appreciate it. But I always like to take the time when I'm reviewing genre fiction like science fiction, fantasy, horror, to let those readers know whether this is a book that they might enjoy, whether this might be a bridging book for them from literary fiction to some other kind of genre. But what I can say is with this book, no, you're not going to enjoy it. If you enjoy literary fiction, this is not for you. It is definitely just one for the horror fans. It's hard to tell whether I'm giving this such a high rating because I expected so little from it. So for anyone watching who has read this book, do you agree with me, or am I allowing my lack of expectation to overpower my thoughts? But putting all that aside, I think this is a book that shows us that Tingle has great things to come. If he continues to put out work and works on his craft, I think that eventually we are going to get an absolute 5-star fantastic book from him. So I will be looking out for anything he puts out next, but probably steering clear of anything that involves dinosaur erotica. So there you go, those are my thoughts on Camp Damascus. I am very glad I read it. I have one more book to review before I get back into the book long list. I thought to myself that maybe 2 books would be enough of a break, but I finished those 2 books and went, you know what, I just want one more book, a little bit of fantasy, away from literary fiction before I dive back in. But I'm definitely going to be diving back into the long list at the end of this week. As always, I want to thank you for watching. I hope you're well, and I'll see you all in the next one.